Previously, on The Great Gatsby, Nick and Tom traveled to the Valley of Ashes. They meet up with Tom's mistress, Myrtle Wilson. It didn't take long to find out that she is a total gold digger. Then we met the lifeless George Wilson, Myrtle's husband, who owns a car shop. They end up at Tom's apartment in Manhattan for an evening party with Myrtle, her sister Catherine, and the McKees, their neighbors. It was a drunken mess, and Tom ends up breaking Myrtle's nose when she brings up Daisy. Now, let's return to The Great Gatsby.
I was on my way to get roaring drunk from the sheer embarrassment when Jordan Baker came out of the house and stood at the head of the marble steps, leaning a little backward and looking with contemptuous interest down into the garden. Welcome or not, I found it necessary to attach myself to someone before I should begin to address cordial remarks to the passers-by. "Hello!" As I headed toward her, my voice seemed unnaturally loud across the garden.
I thought you might be here. I remembered you lived next door to...
She held my hand impersonally, as a promise that she'd take care of me in a minute, and gave ear to two girls in twin yellow dresses, who stopped at the foot of the steps.
Hello. Sorry you didn't win.
They were speaking about the golf tournament. She had lost in the finals the week before.
You don't know who we are, but we met you here about a month ago.
You dyed your hair since then.
I started, but the girls had moved casually on, and her remark was addressed to the premature moon, produced like the supper, no doubt, out of a caterer's basket. With Jordan's slender golden arm resting in mine, we descended the steps and sauntered about the garden. A tray of cocktails floated at us through the twilight. We sat down at a table with the two girls in yellow and three men, which one introduced to us as Mr. Mumble.
Do you come to these parties often?
The last one was the one I met you at. Wasn't it for you, Lucille?
I like to come. I never care what I do, so I always have a good time. When I was here last, I tore my gown on a chair, and he asked me my name and address. Inside of a week, I got a package from Courier's with a new evening gown in it.
Did you keep it?
Sure I did. I was going to wear it tonight, but it was too big in the bust and had to be altered. It was gas blue with lavender beads. $265.
There's something funny about a fellow that'll do a thing like that. He doesn't want any trouble with anybody.
Who doesn't? The two girls and Jordan leaned together confidently.
Gatsby. Someone told me they thought he killed a man once.
A thrill passed over all of us. The three Mr. Mumbles bent forward and listened eagerly. I don't think it's so much that. It's more that he was a German spy during the war. One of the men nodded in confirmation.
I heard that from a man who knew all about him. Grew up with him in Germany.
Oh no, it couldn't be that, because he was in the American Army during the war.
As our credulity switched back to her, she leaned forward with enthusiasm.
You look at him sometimes when he thinks nobody's looking at him. I'll bet he killed a man.
We all turned and looked around for Gatsby. It was a testimony to the romantic speculation he inspired that there were whispers about him from those who found little that it was necessary to whisper about in this world. The first supper, there would be another one after midnight, was now being served, and Jordan invited me to join her own party, who were spread around the table on the other side of the garden. There were three married couples and Jordan's escort, a persistent undergraduate given to violent innuendo, and obviously under the impression that sooner or later Jordan was going to yield him up, her person, to a greater or lesser degree. Instead of rambling, this party had preserved a dignified homogeneity, and assumed to itself the function of representing the staid nobility of the countryside, East Egg condescending to West Egg, and carefully on guard against its spectroscopic gaiety.
Let's get out of here. This is much too polite for me.
Don't go away, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. This radio play is brought to you by For the Eyes That Charm.
Do you want to glow with enchantment? Try our new Maybelline mascara. It'll make you stand out above the rest. So soft, so flattering, so natural looking. You too can have beautiful eyes by using Maybelline, the world's favorite eye makeup. Our mascara is top-notch in quality and is the best out of any brand out there, and we'll guarantee that you'll be happy with Maybelline mascara.
And now, that's our regularly scheduled program, The Great Gatsby.
We got up, and she explained that we were going to find the host. I had never met him, she said, and it was making me uneasy. The undergraduate nodded in a cynical, melancholy way. The bar where we glanced first was crowded, but Gatsby was not there. She couldn't find him from the top of the steps, and he wasn't on the veranda. On a chance, we tried an important-looking door and was walked into a Gothic library, paneled with carved English oak, and probably transported complete from some ruins overseas. A stout, middle-aged man with enormous owl-eyed spectacles was sitting somewhat drunk on the edge of the table, staring with unsteady concentration at the shelves of books. As we entered, we wheeled excitedly around and examined Jordan from head to foot.
What do you think?
About what? He waved his hand toward the bookshelves.
About that. As a matter of fact, you needed to bother as certain. I certain they're real.
The books?
Absolutely real. I have pages and everything. I thought they'd be a nice, durable cupboard. Matter of fact, they're absolutely real. Pages. And here, let me show you.
Taking our skepticism for granted, he rushed to the bookcases and returned with Volume 1 of the Stoddard Lectures.
See? It's a bona fide piece of printed matter. It fooled me. This fellow's a regular Belasco. It did triumph. What thoroughness. What realism. Knew when to stop, too. Didn't cut the pages. But what do you want? What do you expect?
He snatched the book from me and replaced it hastily on its shelf, muttering that if one brick was removed, the whole library was liable to collapse.
Who brought you? Or did you just come? I was brought. Most people were brought. I was brought by a woman named Roosevelt. Miss Claude Roosevelt. Do you know her? I met her somewhere last night. I've been drunk for about a week now, and I thought it might be sober me to sit up in a library.
Has it?
A real bit, I think. I can't tell yet. I've only been here an hour. Did I tell you about the books? They're real.
You told us. We shook hands with him gravely and went back outdoors. There was dancing now on the canvas in the garden. Old men pushing young girls backward in eternal graceless circles. Superior couples holding each other tortuously, fashionably, and keeping in the corners. A great number of single girls dancing individualistically, or relieving the orchestra for a moment of the burden of the banjo or the traps. By midnight, the hilarity had increased. A celebrated tenor has sung in Italian, and a notorious contralto had sung in jazz, and between the numbers people were doing stunts all over the garden, while happy, vacacious bursts of laughter rose toward the summer sky. A pair of stage twins, who turned out to be the girls in yellow, did a baby act in a costume, and champagne was served in glasses bigger than finger bowls. The moon had risen higher, and floating in the sound was a triangle of silver scales, trembling a little to the stiff, tiny drop of the banjos on the lawn. I was still with Jordan Baker. We were sitting at a table with a man of about my age and a ratty little girl who gave way upon the slightest provocation to uncontrollable laughter. I had taken 2 finger bowls of champagne, and the scene had changed before my eyes into something significant, elemental, and profound. At a lull in the entertainment, the man looked at me and smiled.
Your face is familiar. Weren't you in the 3rd Division during the war?
Why, yes, I was in the 9th Machine Gun Battalion.
I was in the 7th Infantry until June 1918. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before.
We talked for a moment about some wet, gray little villages in France. Evidently, he lived in the vicinity, for he told me that he had just bought a hydroplane that was going to try out in the morning.
Want to go with me, old sport? Just near the shore along the Sound.
What time?
any time that suits you best.
It was at the tip of my tongue to ask his name when Jordan looked around and smiled.
Having a gay time now?
Much better. This is an unusual party for me. I haven't even seen the host. I live over there. I waved my hand at the invisible hedge in the distance. And this man Gatsby sent over his chauffeur with an invitation. For a moment, he looked at me as if he failed to understand.
I'm Gatsby.
What? Oh, I beg your pardon.
I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host.
He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in a life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you, with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just so far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to be believed in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you hoped to convey. Precisely at that point, it vanished, and I was looking at an elegant young roughneck, a year or 2 over 30, whose elaborate formality of speech just missed being absurd. Some time before he introduced himself, I'd got a strong impression that he was picking his words with care. Almost at the moment when Mr. Gatsby identified himself, a butler hurried toward him with the information that Chicago was calling him on the wire.
Excuse me, if you want anything, just ask for it, old sport. Excuse me, I will rejoin you later.
I had expected that Mr. Gatsby would be a florid and corpulent person in his middle years. Who is he? Do you know?
He's just a man named Gatsby. And that's all we have for today, folks. Stay tuned to find out what happens next in The Great Gatsby. This radio show was brought to you by...
Want the best energy-enriched vitamins and mineral breakfast for your family? Then buy our slow-baked Wonder Bread. It's a wonder. It's the best brand out there, and people love it. You can even make snacks and lunches with our Wonder Bread. Go to your local grocer and buy it for a better tomorrow. Batteries not included.